There's this paradox that a lot of people of faith live with every day. On one side, you've got that driven, get it done part of your personality. And on the other, a spiritual path that's all about surrender, grace, and just letting go. So, how does someone who is wired for doing find peace in a faith of being? Well, the answer is pretty fascinating, and it all starts with one single question. So let me ask you this. What personality trait do you think is the single best predictor of someone being religious? Now, a lot of us might jump to openness. We picture these creative, philosophical types, just naturally drawn to mystery and wonder. But the actual research, it points to something completely different. And honestly, it's not what you'd expect at all. Get this. The answer is conscientiousness. Yeah, really. We're talking about the planners, the organizers, the people who are just plain reliable and disciplined. Study after study shows this trait is the biggest personality predictor of religiosity. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? A life of faith isn't just a few big mystical moments. It's a daily practice. It takes structure and ritual and commitment, all things that a conscientious mind is built for. And that right there is our central paradox. If the very people who are most drawn to faith are wired for effort, control, and getting things right, how in the world do they navigate a spiritual journey that ultimately asks them to surrender? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together, and we're going to start with the actual hardware inside our skulls. So let's dive into the science. What is actually physically happening in our brains during a moment of deep spiritual connection? Well, there's a whole field of study trying to figure that out. It's called neurotheology. And one of the pioneers in this field is a researcher named Andrew Newberg. He wanted to get past the debates and actually see what a spiritual experience looks like inside the brain. And his method was pretty revolutionary. He put people like Franciscan nuns and Tibetan monks into brain scanners while they would deep in prayer or meditation. And here's what he found. This is the thing that really put neurotheology on the map. During these intense moments of prayer, a specific part of the brain called the parietal lobe went quiet. Now, this is our brain's orientation center. It's the part that draws the line between me and not me. So when that area powers down, the biological result is this feeling of dissolved boundaries, a sense of being one with everything. For the first time, science was describing the mystical experience in the language of neurology. But of course, this is the point where a skeptic might go, aha, see? It's all just a glitch in your brain. It's a common argument, but it falls into what's known as the reductionist trap. It's kind of like saying that because we understand the biology of the eye, a sunset is no longer beautiful, It confuses explaining the mechanism with explaining the meaning of the experience. Newberg himself offers a much more interesting way to look at it. He says his scans can't prove if the brain is creating the experience or if it's simply perceiving a reality that's already there. Think about it. If some kind of higher power exists, wouldn't it make sense for our brains to have evolved with a kind of biological docking station, a built-in way to connect with it? Maybe he didn't find the source of the signal, but he might have just found the receiver. Okay, so if our brains have this incredible hardware, let's go back to the software, that conscientious personality. Why is this trait such a huge asset for faith, and where does it become a liability? So when we say conscientiousness, it's really more than just being tidy. It's a whole mix of things. Feeling competent, liking order, having a strong sense of duty, striving to achieve things, being self-disciplined, and thinking things through carefully. Put it all together, and you get someone who is principled, reliable, and just keeps going. And you can immediately see why organized religion can feel like coming home for these folks. It offers clear moral guidelines for the dutiful, provides structure and ritual for the orderly, and sets long-term goals for the achievement-driven. Honestly, these are the builders of faith communities. They treat faith like a marathon, not a sprint. But that greatest strength can also hide their greatest weakness. So what happens when that drive for order, for duty, for getting it right just goes too far? When the desire to do good twists into a terrifying obsession with not doing bad? Well, it actually has a name, scrupulosity. It's a form of OCD where that wonderful conscientiousness turns against itself, creating this constant, agonizing fear of having sinned. A person's moral compass becomes so hypersensitive that it just spins out of control, turning faith from a place of peace into a source of deep, deep anxiety. People struggling with scrupulosity get stuck in this absolutely devastating loop. It all starts with a random, intrusive thought, something we all have. But because of something called thought-action fusion, they believe that having the thought is just as bad as doing the action. This creates this crushing guilt, which they try to get rid of with a compulsive ritual, like praying over and over. And it works, for a second. But then the cycle just starts all over again. They're trapped, trying to control their own minds through sheer, exhausting effort. So, how do you break that cycle? How does a conscientious person learn to let go without feeling like they're abandoning who they are? The key might be a powerful metaphor that completely reframes where spiritual energy comes from. Imagine a person running on pure, self-reliant effort. They're in a rowboat. They're disciplined, they're working hard, but all the power is coming from them. And eventually, they're going to burn out. Now picture a sailboat. It still takes effort, right? You have to hoist the sails, you have to steer the rudder. That's your discipline, your conscientiousness. But the real power, the force that actually moves you across the water, comes from an outside source, the wind. This is the big shift from pure self-reliance to a faith that relies on grace. And that shift, from the rowboat to the sailboat, isn't just a clever mind game. It opens up a path that is so much more forgiving and sustainable. It's a core idea in a lot of faiths, and it's especially central to the Christian idea of grace. The whole game changes. The rowboat mindset sees faith as a responsibility, a massive checklist of duties to be fulfilled perfectly. But the sailboat mindset, it sees faith as a response, a joyful, grateful answer to the fact that you're already loved, already accepted, already forgiven. This simple shift creates room for grace and can free a conscientious person from the prison of their own perfectionism.
Let's just put them side by side here. In the rowboat mindset, the power is all you, which leads to self-reliance. Your motivation is often a fear of failure. And when you mess up, it's shame, and just trying even harder. But the sailboat mindset is totally different. The source of power is external, it's God-reliance. The motivation becomes love and gratitude. And the reaction to failure isn't shame, it's repentance and forgiveness. It's the journey from anxious striving to disciplined surrender.
So in the end, you see that science and faith don't have to be enemies. They can be seen as just exploring different layers of the same reality. Science can map the brain, showing us the beautiful mechanics of our biological docking station for the divine. But as this quote puts it so perfectly, science shows us how the music of the mind is played. Faith invites us to ask a much deeper question. Is there a composer? And what does the music ultimately mean?